The sky over Los Angeles was thick with smoke, a dull, coppery haze turning daylight into something unreal. Sirens screamed in the distance, helicopters sliced the air above, and the scent of burning pine and plastic clung to every breath. Roads were closed, neighborhoods emptied, and the wildfire raged like a living thing. But in the middle of the chaos, Keanu Reeves tightened the straps of his fire shelter pack and pushed deeper into the scorched forest, his boots crunching over ash and broken branches. He wasn't a firefighter. He had no formal training. But when the call went out for volunteers to help with last-ditch evacuation efforts, he didn't hesitate. He'd always believed that showing up mattered more than being perfect. That afternoon, the rescue team split up near an abandoned campsite. Keanu's group scanned tents half swallowed by embers and trees charred down to skeletons. The smoke burned their throats and turned every breath into work. Then, he heard it, a sound so faint it could have been imagined. A bark. Not panicked, not loud, but trembling, fragile. He paused, listening. There it was again, soft, urgent, a cry. Lost in a world full of fire. You guys keep heading north, he told the others. I'm going toward that sound. He stepped over fallen limbs and ducked under hanging debris, the world narrowing to that one voice. It led him to a small clearing where the earth glowed with heat beneath the surface. That's where he saw it. A puppy, no bigger than a football, shaking beside a half-collapsed log. Its fur was singed, its eyes wide with fear, reflecting the flames. But when it saw him, it came forward and tugged gently on the cuff of his pants, then turned and trotted a few steps ahead before looking back. Not just a cry for help, an invitation. Keanu didn't ask questions. "All right, little one," he murmured, voice low and steady. "Lead the way." The puppy led him with a kind of desperate purpose, darting ahead through ash-covered underbrush, then pausing every few feet to make sure he was still following. Keanu didn't know where they were going, but he didn't need to. He trusted the urgency in that little body, the silent plea in those wide, smoke-stung eyes. The deeper they moved into the forest, the more the world seemed to close in around them. The flames crackled nearby, low and hungry. Smoke clung to his skin, thick and suffocating, wrapping around his lungs like a fist. Every step was a challenge, every breath like inhaling fire. But the pup somehow kept going, trembling legs carrying it forward through the devastation. And Keanu followed, wiping sweat and soot from his brow, telling himself again and again, just a little farther. Then he saw her. At the edge of a scorched clearing, tied tightly to a blackened tree, was a dog. Her coat was matted with soot, her limbs shaking. But her eyes were alert, fierce, afraid, and still, somehow, full of love. The puppy sprinted to her side, nuzzling against her, yipping and barking as if trying to say, "I found help. I found him." The dog didn't move much, but the way she leaned slightly toward her pup told Keanu everything. She wasn't just any dog. She was a mother, and she hadn't run when the fire came because she couldn't, because she wouldn't leave her child. Keanu dropped to his knees beside her, coughing through the smoke as he pulled out the small utility knife from his belt. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got both of you." His fingers trembled as he worked the blade under the cords. The heat made his vision blur, but he didn't stop. The dog didn't resist, only watched him, her eyes flicking constantly between Keanu and her pup, her body still half-turned toward the encroaching flames. Even tied down, even exhausted, she was still protecting, still mothering. The final strand snapped. The dog collapsed to the ground, her legs giving out beneath her, but within seconds she struggled to her feet again, swaying as she leaned forward to sniff her pup, to make sure he was safe. Keanu felt his chest tighten. The love between them was so raw, so real, it cut through the smoke. He reached down, scooping the puppy into his arms, and nodded at the mother. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here." She didn't need convincing. Her paws stumbled through the ash as she followed, staying close, every movement an act of willpower. Together, the three of them turned back toward the flames, not because they wanted to, but because there was no other path. And Keanu knew then that what they were facing wasn't just a fire. It was a test of how far love could go, how far courage could stretch when driven by something deeper than fear. And they were about to find out together. The forest was no longer just burning, it was transforming into something primeval. Every shadow looked alive. Every gust of wind carried embers like glowing insects set loose from the underworld. Keanu pushed forward, the puppy clutched tightly against his chest, the mother dog at his side, her breathing heavy, labored, but unwavering. The fire was now behind them, beside them, and sometimes it felt like it was above them. Trees groaned under their own weight, bark cracking, limbs falling. The very earth felt unsteady beneath his boots. He didn't look back, he couldn't. The only direction that mattered now was forward. The mother dog, Blaze had decided, moved with an intensity that seemed to pull from something ancient. Despite the smoke, despite the pain radiating through her burned limbs, she kept pace, nose to the ground, ears rotating with sharp purpose. Keanu knew she wasn't just escaping, she was leading. She knew this terrain better than he did, and right now, her instinct was their only map. The pup, small and quiet in his arms, had stopped trembling. He had buried his nose under Keanu's chin, pressing into the rhythm of his heart like it was a drum keeping time through the chaos. Suddenly, Blaze stopped. Her body tensed, tail stiff, and her ears twisted toward the left. A low growl bubbled up from her throat. Keanu followed her gaze and froze. There it was again, a sound not made by fire or falling wood. Faint, high-pitched, broken by sobs. A voice. A child's voice. "Help me!" it cried, barely louder than the snapping branches around them. Keanu's heart jolted in his chest. Blaze barked sharply, confirming what he already knew. Someone else was still out there. Without a word, Keanu handed Blaze a quick nod and whispered to the pup, "Stay close to your mom." He gently set the puppy on the ground and looked Blaze straight in the eye. "I'll be back. Watch him." It felt insane to leave them, but he had no choice. The voice was coming from just beyond a small rise, through a curtain of smoke so thick it blurred the trees into silhouettes. Keanu ran, boots kicking up ash and his lungs already screaming. He followed the sound to a half-collapsed wooden cabin, flames licking up one wall, the roof creaking and threatening to give way. Inside, near a shattered corner of the room, a boy, maybe 7, maybe 8, was curled up with a stuffed animal clutched tight to his chest, his tear-streaked face pale under the flickering light. Keanu didn't hesitate. He ducked low, burst through the half-open door and sprinted across the burning floor. "I've got you," he called, trying to sound calm even as sweat poured from every inch of his body. The boy looked up, and for one terrible second, Keanu thought he might bolt. But the boy nodded, eyes wide, and let himself be scooped up. Keanu turned to leave just in time to see a support beam give way and crash down in front of the exit, the room filling with sparks and fire. He shielded the boy with his body, instinct taking over, his brain racing for an out. Smoke closed in fast, choking. The windows were too small, the walls too hot. He was trapped. And then, through the haze, a sharp, unmistakable bark rang out. "Blaze!" He turned toward the side wall, saw a portion of it buckling, a sliver of weakness, and outside that gap, Blaze was there, pawing, tugging at the corner, trying to tear it down herself. Keanu charged, kicking at the wood, slamming his shoulder against it. Another bark, another kick. Then, suddenly, the wall gave way just enough. He pushed the boy through first, crawling after him as the flames roared behind. The moment they tumbled out, Blaze stepped back, panting but alert. The puppy, Spark, he named him, whimpered and ran up, nuzzling both his mother and Keanu. Keanu knelt, cradling the boy as the child clung to him. "Thank you," the boy whispered through tears, and Keanu could barely find his voice to respond. He looked at Blaze, her coat streaked with soot and her chest heaving with effort, and at Spark, tail wagging despite it all. He realized they had all just saved each other. But it wasn't over. The fire was moving faster now. The wind had shifted again, turning embers into waves. They had to keep going. Keanu hoisted the boy onto his back, held Spark close, and Blaze took point again, her instincts sharper than ever. They moved as one. A new pack. An unlikely team held together by something deeper than survival. With every step, Keanu felt their bond tighten, an invisible tether between man, child, and dog. He didn't know if they'd make it out, but he knew one thing for certain. They would not stop. Not now. Not together. The forest was a maze of fire and ash, alive with chaos, hissing and snapping like some ancient beast unleashed. Trees leaned like ghosts, their limbs blackened, reaching toward the fleeing group as if to pull them back in. Keanu moved with purpose, every step driven by instinct more than thought. Ember clung to his chest, her tiny heart pounding against his ribs. On his back, the boy's arms wrapped tightly around his neck, silent now, too exhausted or too scared to speak, and in front, Blaze led them, her movements low and sure, navigating the choking landscape like a seasoned scout. Her body bore the marks of the fire, fur singed, one leg favoring a limp, but her will was untouched. She didn't look back, she didn't hesitate. She just moved, with the determination of a soul who knew her mission was not over. The boy had stopped crying, but Keanu could feel the tremble in his limbs, the way his tiny fingers clenched when the wind howled through the burnt-out canopy. They were still deep in the burn zone. The smoke was so thick it turned the world gray and orange, light filtering through like stained glass in a cathedral on fire. Sparks rained from the sky, and every few minutes, another tree fell in the distance with a shuddering crash. Keanu's legs ached and his throat burned with each breath, but he didn't allow himself to slow. He wouldn't, not while Blaze was still pushing forward, not while that boy trusted him, not while Ember rested against his heart like a heartbeat outside his body. Blaze stopped suddenly at a fork in the path. Her ears perked, nose twitching, reading the air like scripture. She sniffed once, twice, then veered left. Keanu followed without question. Somewhere deep down, he knew he had given his trust over to her completely. The dog had saved him once already. Her instincts were better than any map. She hadn't just led him out of a burning cabin. She had waited, paced outside, pulled at the wall like she could feel that someone was inside who needed her. She had stayed, even after everything. But the flames weren't done with them yet. The fire circled faster now. The temperature rose sharply. Keanu's shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat, and his vision started to blur. The boy on his back whimpered, and Keanu tightened his grip. "Just a little farther," he whispered. Blaze paused again. She barked once, sharply, and darted toward a rocky incline. Keanu squinted through the smoke and saw it. Elevation. A ridge that might give them visibility, a place to signal for help. He followed her lead, the ground beneath his boots now steep and loose with ash and gravel. The climb was brutal. Every muscle screamed in protest. He slipped once, caught himself with a hand against burning bark, gritted his teeth. Pushed harder. Blaze kept going, looking back just once to make sure they were close. That single glance gave him strength. If she could do it, wounded and exhausted, so could he. They reached the summit as the sun dipped low behind a wall of smoke. The sky turned blood orange. From that height, Keanu saw a flicker of hope. A helicopter in the distance, its searchlight cutting through the haze like a lifeline from heaven. He let out a ragged breath and waved both arms, shouting with what strength he had left. "Hey, over here!" Blaze joined in, barking with every ounce of her soul. Ember added her high-pitched yips, as if her little voice might just tip the scales. The helicopter turned slowly, then angled toward them. Relief washed over Keanu, but it came with a cost. The wind kicked up as the rotors approached, feeding the fire like oxygen into a dying flame. Below them, the path they had climbed shimmered with new heat, a fallen branch igniting like a matchstick. The fire leapt up the incline, cutting off the way they had come. They were trapped on the ridge. The pilot gestured to a small clearing a few yards away, a place just flat enough for a rescue crew to descend. Keanu turned, hoisting the boy tighter on his back and gathering Ember close. Blaze, still steady despite everything, led them once again. But then the worst happened. A tree above them, weakened by the blaze, snapped and fell with terrifying speed, crashing between Keanu and the path ahead. Sparks exploded in every direction. Keanu stumbled back, shielding the boy and Ember. When the smoke cleared, he saw Blaze on the other side, singed but still standing. She barked, pacing, trying to find a way around. Keanu shouted, "Blaze, stay there!" But she didn't. She leapt through a narrow gap in the burning debris, limping but determined. She wasn't going to leave them, not now. She reached them just as the rescue team arrived, ropes descending, medics yelling commands. Keanu passed the boy up first, then Ember. He turned to Blaze, who was shaking, barely able to stand. He knelt beside her, touched her cheek gently. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought us home." Blaze let out a soft, broken sound, a mix between a sigh and a whimper, and leaned into him. Together they rose one last time, and as Keanu helped her toward the rescue harness, he knew this moment would never leave him. The smoke would fade, the fire would be extinguished, but the memory of a mother's love, of a pup's trust, and of the bond formed in the heart of a wildfire, those would burn in him forever. The wind howled through the ridge like a wounded animal, carrying with it smoke, ash, and the heat of a forest refusing to surrender. The fire below had been momentarily pushed back by the gust stirred from the rescue helicopter's blades, but the inferno was relentless, devouring everything in its path, testing every ounce of strength from those still trapped within its breath. Keanu stood at the edge of the slope, Blaze beside him, trembling yet upright, her bandaged frame silhouetted against a sky stained with fire. In his arms, Ember whimpered softly, his tiny body pressed tight against Keanu's chest. Behind him, the boy held on to his backpack, his small hands now sticky with sweat and soot, but still refusing to let go. They had made it through the fire, through the cabin collapse, through the ridge, but the forest wasn't done with them. A sharp crack echoed through the trees above, as if the earth itself was screaming. Keanu's head snapped up. A fiery branch, long and thick, dislodged from one of the last standing pines, snapped clean off and fell fast, too fast to stop. The air split open as it crashed into their path, flames flaring on impact, blocking their final stretch to the rescue team waiting 100 feet ahead. The fire surged forward again, licking at the ground like a tide returning to claim what had momentarily escaped. Blaze skidded to a halt, her body tensed in alarm. Keanu's heart thudded in his chest like a war drum. Time slowed. The puppy squirmed in his arms, sensing danger, and the boy let out a frightened cry. Keanu turned, trying to move them back, but the heat behind them flared again, narrowing their window. "No," he muttered, eyes scanning wildly. "Not now. Not after all this." Then Blaze did something that would be burned into his memory forever. She turned to Spark. Ember gave a short, sharp bark, then without hesitation, lunged through the rising flames. Keanu shouted after her, "Blaze, no!" But it was too late. Her body hit the ground with a sickening thump as she knocked the burning branch aside, clearing a space just wide enough. In the act of saving them, she had taken the full brunt of the fire on her own body. The flames clawed at her fur as she let out a pained yelp, collapsing for a moment before trying to crawl forward. Ember cried out, squirming from Keanu's arms toward her. Keanu dropped to his knees beside her, his voice cracking with desperation. Spark pressed against her, licking at her face, whimpering, trying to pull her back into the present, as if his love alone could undo the burn marks that now marred her sides. Keanu wrapped his arms around both dogs, his forehead resting gently against Blaze's. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, choking on tears. "But of course you did, because that's who you are." The boy behind him stood silently now, watching, his wide eyes full of something between heartbreak and awe. Keanu lifted Blaze in his arms, her body limp but breathing, Spark tucked tightly beneath his other arm. "We're going. Together. You hear me?" he said, his voice rough and low. "You don't leave us behind, and we don't leave you." The descent down the slope was agony. His legs burned, every step dragging them closer to the rescue team and farther from the fire's reach. Blaze didn't struggle. She simply leaned into Keanu's chest, her breath shallow, trusting him completely. Spark whimpered with every step, his tiny paws dancing nervously, but he didn't let Keanu side. The boy stumbled once, but Keanu reached back with a soot-covered hand and gripped his arm. "Stay close, we're almost there." At the clearing, the medics were already sprinting toward them. Stretchers, water bottles, oxygen masks. Hands reached out, lifting the boy, cradling Spark, gently easing Blaze from Keanu's arms. He collapsed onto his knees, his body shaking with exhaustion, watching as they worked quickly. Bandages wrapped around Blaze's body. Water poured over singed fur, and Spark? He refused to be moved. He stayed beside her, a tiny sentinel, his nose pressed to hers like a lifeline. Keanu turned his face away for a moment, wiping sweat and ash and tears into the crook of his elbow. He had never felt something quite like this, not on a film set, not in front of a camera, not even on the long, lonely nights of quiet reflection that had shaped his life. This wasn't about performance. This was real. This was sacrifice. A medic knelt beside him. "We're flying them to the animal trauma unit. She's stable for now," she said softly. Keanu could only nod. He stood slowly, every muscle protesting, and walked to the stretcher where Blaze lay. Her eyes fluttered open, finding his. He reached down, touching her head gently. "You're a hero," he said. "You saved us all." Her tail moved just once. As the helicopter lifted into the smoke-tinted sky, Keanu stood beside it, Spark in his arms, the boy by his side. Below them, the forest still burned, but something brighter had survived the flames, something fierce, something sacred, and he would never forget it. The helicopter soared above the blazing forest, its blades slicing through the smoky air with rhythmic urgency. Inside the cabin, the space was tight, filled with a low hum of radio chatter and the steady beeping of medical monitors. Keanu sat on the floor, his back pressed to the cool metal wall, his arms wrapped around Spark, the little pup still trembling but safe. Across from him, Blaze lay on a padded stretcher, her body bandaged, her breathing shallow but steady. An IV was taped to her front leg. Her eyes flickered open now and then, searching, anchoring themselves to familiar sights. Spark's soft brown fur, Keanu's soot-streaked face. She didn't whine, didn't cry. She just breathed, enduring like she always had. The boy sat quietly beside Keanu, now wrapped in a blanket, his small fingers clutching Keanu's sleeve, unwilling to let go. None of them spoke, but in the silence there was a gravity, a weight that didn't need words. They had survived something no one else in that aircraft could fully understand. As they descended onto the landing pad of a rural emergency relief station, the chaos resumed. Medical staff rushed forward to take Blaze. Spark barked in protest, squirming in Keanu's arms, unwilling to be separated. But Keanu stepped in, calming him, walking alongside the stretcher as they wheeled Blaze into a makeshift veterinary tent. Spark padded beside them, refusing to fall behind, his tiny paws keeping pace with the larger world moving too fast. Inside, the team worked quickly, cooling blankets, burn ointment, fluids. Keanu stood just outside the tent, pacing. His hands ran through his hair over and over again, now streaked with ash, sweat, and Spark waited too, curled just by the entrance, head on his front paws, eyes fixed on the opening like it held the answer to everything. When Yvette finally emerged, Keanu stopped pacing. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but a gentle voice. "She's stable," she said softly. "Can I see her?" he asked. The vet nodded. "She's asking for you." When he entered the tent, Spark slipped in beside him, tail wagging low, almost unsure. Blaze was lying on her side, wrapped in gauze, her head resting gently on a folded towel. But when she saw them, her tail moved slightly, brushing the floor in the faintest motion. Spark rushed forward, hopping onto the mat, nuzzling into her side. Blaze let out a soft breath, a sound of recognition, maybe even relief. Keanu knelt beside them, placing his hand on her head, his fingers moving gently behind her ears. "You scared me out there," he whispered. "But you did it. You got us all out." Blaze didn't move much, but her eyes blinked slowly and her tail flicked again. She understood. That was all that mattered. They stayed there for hours. Keanu refused to leave. Volunteers brought him water, offered food. He barely noticed. Spark eventually curled up beside Blaze, his tiny body pressed to hers, his breathing syncing with hers in a silent promise. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." As the sky outside shifted from black to soft gray, and the distant hills glowed red from fires still burning, the world slowly began to come back into focus. By morning, Keanu stepped out of the tent, exhausted, but calm. The boy, now cleaned up and bundled in a jacket 2 sizes too big, spotted him from across the camp. He ran to him, arms outstretched. Keanu crouched to catch him, and the two embraced, no longer strangers, but survivors. "Is she okay?" the boy asked, voice fragile. Keanu nodded. "She's a fighter," he said. "Like you." Later that afternoon, a young reporter from a local paper approached the relief station. She had heard whispers of a rescue. A man, a child, and 2 dogs who made it out when no one thought anyone could. She didn't recognize Keanu at first. When she asked his name and he gave it, her eyes widened, but he held up a hand. "This isn't about me," he said. "You want to write something? Write about them." He nodded toward Blaze and Spark. "They're the ones who carried us through." Over the next few days, the story spread, first locally, then nationally. Photos of Blaze, bandaged but alive, lying beside her pup and the man who carried them from the fire, circulated on every platform. People donated in droves to animal rescue organizations. Others volunteered for fire response. Schools read the story aloud in classrooms, and children drew pictures of the brave dog mom and her puppy. Spark and Blaze became symbols, not just of survival, but of love that runs deeper than instinct, love that risks everything. Keanu remained quiet throughout. He didn't grant interviews. He didn't attend press events. He just stayed close to his new family. Because that's what they were now. A man who had walked into fire, a puppy who wouldn't give up, and a mother who would rather burn than leave her child behind. Their bond hadn't been formed in comfort, but in smoke and ash and blood and heat. And bonds like that don't break. One night, a week later, Keanu sat outside his house, the stars above him crisp and brilliant. Blaze lay beside his chair, still healing, her breathing soft. Spark was curled up in her shadow, honored. Weeks passed. The fire was gone, but the scars it left, on land, on hearts, on memories, remained. Keanu brought Blaze and Spark home with him, not as guests, not as rescues, but as family. His house, once a place of quiet routine, was now alive in a way it hadn't been in years. There was the soft thump of paws on hardwood floors, the jingle of a collar, the small sighs of sleep from the fireplace rug. The living room became a sanctuary. Blaze lay stretched out beneath the large front window, her bandaged side rising and falling slowly as she recovered. Spark rarely left her side. Even when the sun poured in and warmed the floorboards, Spark stayed pressed against her, as if he knew healing wasn't just about rest, but presence. Keanu adjusted to the new rhythm with ease. Morning walks became morning rituals. He carried Spark in one arm and let Blaze set the pace, her steps slow but steady. Neighbors waved, smiled, offered quiet nods of recognition. Some had seen the viral photos. Most had heard the story by now. The actor who walked into a wildfire and came out carrying a boy and 2 dogs. But Keanu didn't care for the spotlight. What mattered was that Blaze was eating again, that Spark had started chasing his own tail in circles on the lawn, that the boy, Noah boy, was safe with his family again, and that the weight of that day was slowly transforming from trauma into something else, something sacred. One evening, the doorbell rang. Keanu opened it to find a young woman standing there, holding a notepad and a microphone, her press badge clipped neatly to her shirt. She introduced herself as Camille Harper, a reporter from an animal welfare journal. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke, not from nerves, but reverence. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "we've been following the wildfire rescue. Everyone has. The photos, the footage, what you did, what Blaze and Spark did. It's more than just a story. It's hope. We'd like to share that hope. May I come in?" Keanu stepped aside. He didn't speak right away, but he led her through the house to the living room, where Blaze lay curled in the sunlight. Spark looked up with wide, curious eyes. Camille knelt instinctively, setting her notebook down. "They're even more beautiful in person," she whispered. Keanu sat across from her and said simply, "This isn't about me. This is their story." Over the next few days, Camille returned again and again, interviewing veterinarians, rescue workers, even the boy's mother. She captured the little moments most others missed, like the way Blaze would nudge Spark toward the water bowl before drinking herself, or how Spark had taken to sleeping with one paw always touching Keanu's boot. The article that followed wasn't just a news piece, it was a tribute, a reminder. It spoke of courage, yes, but also of tenderness, of what it means to protect something smaller than you, of what it means to be loyal even when the world is burning. The piece went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Letters poured in from around the country, some handwritten, some typed in shaky fonts from hospital rooms and classrooms. Children drew Blaze with a cape. Parents shared stories of pets that had saved them in unseen ways. A woman from Vermont wrote, "My son hasn't spoken in months since our house fire, but after reading about Blaze and Spark, he asked for a dog." Keanu read every message, not because he sought validation, but because he knew, deep in his bones, that stories like theirs had a purpose. They reminded people of something simple and eternal. We are not alone in this world. That winter, Keanu helped organize a fundraiser for local animal rescue efforts, using the momentum from the story to raise awareness. Spark was the unofficial mascot, darting between guests and licking hands with joyful abandon. Blaze, now much stronger, walked beside Keanu with quiet dignity, wearing a soft red bandana embroidered with the words, "Rescuer." After the event, as the crowd thinned and music faded into the night, Keanu stood under the string lights with Blaze at his side, Spark curled at their feet. He looked up at the stars, clear now, no longer veiled by smoke, and exhaled deeply, not with sadness, with gratitude. "We made it," he whispered, "not just through the fire, through everything." Blaze looked up, her amber eyes catching the moonlight, and nudged his hand gently with her nose. Spark yawned, rolled onto his back, and stretched toward the stars. Keanu smiled. He'd lived through fame, through grief, through silence, but nothing had cracked him open quite like this. The way a mother's instinct, a puppy's faith, and a stranger's need had converged in one of nature's cruelest moments. And from that crucible of flame, something unbreakable had been born. Not just survival. Family,